And broadcast journalist Tete Kofi joins me from the UK via Zoom to look through this latest developments. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. We understand that US, Canadian and British officials left a group of 20 meeting in Washington as Russian delegates speak in protest of Russia's continued invasion of Ukraine. What's your reading of this latest development?
I'm sitting here observing this somewhat aghast because what the situation needs more than anything now is diplomacy and real talking. But one hand can't clap itself. You need both people at the table to enable negotiations to take place. And it seems to me that by this rather churlish act of walking out at such a senior level meeting, at which one of the key impacts resulting from this conflict will be discussed, being the impact on the world's financial system, important supply chains and so on, that, one of the parties has just flounced out of the room. It is truly extraordinary.
Right, but U.S. President Joe Biden has said that Russia should not remain a member of the G20, a position supported by Canada and others. Do you think these world powers are successful in their isolation of Russia?
Well, you see, it's one thing for each of the kind of parties in conflict to hold positions. They can wish whatever they wish on the other, but what they can't afford to do is to stop talking and to start walking out of meetings. You see, people seem not to understand the history behind this whole event. In America, there is something called the Monroe Doctrine. And whereas it was established in a very long time ago, it's still very much in play. And what the Monroe Doctrine basically says is that America reserves the right to intervene in any territory in which its interests, particularly territories close to its borders, in which its interests are threatened. And as a result of that, Senator Bernie Sanders himself said that America has caused regime change in 12, no less than 12, Southern American states. You and I will both remember, and your audience will also remember, that in the 60s, there was a Cuban Missile Crisis in which President John F. Kennedy nearly took the world to nuclear war, all because the Russians decided to site nuclear-capable weapons just literally 70 miles from the shores of America. And so America intervened. Now, if you consider the fact that as a result of the reduction of the Soviet Union to Russia and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact organization has collapsed, and NATO has crept 13 countries closer to Russia. Anything that happens in Ukraine has got to be, if you follow the Monroe Doctrine in reverse, has got to be within the purview and the interest of the Russian people. And so the fact that they intervened in the way that they did should absolutely not be strange at all to the American people.
Yeah. Well, this group of countries that made up the G20 account for 85% of the global GDP, knowing full well that there is strength in numbers. Would you say isolating Russia amounts to them cutting off their nose to spite their face?
You couldn't have put it better. On account of the fact that Russia will now be forced to sell a lot of its fuel to China. Because Russia's been cast out of the international financial nexus by its exclusion from the SWIFT system, they are now going to get paid in rubles, that's Russian currency, for their fuel. Now, what that does is actually threaten the position of America as the world's reserve currency with the petrodollar. Because once China and Russia start doing business together, the whole center of gravity of world international finance starts to shift. That's only one thing. The other thing is the fact that between them, Ukraine and Russia provide about 30% of the world's grain. Now, that is significant, and already we are beginning to see shocks and disturbances on the food supply chain, quite apart from the impacts on fuel and oil, which here in the United Kingdom, we're already feeling it. So when you say cut your nose off to spite your face, this is what is going to happen. We are all going to suffer as a result of what appears really to any kind of lucid observer as rather churlish, rather childish behavior by very senior people who ought to know a lot better.
Well, what one can really imagine what will come out of this, because the goal is for them to ensure that the war is actually, is ceased and stopped at the end of the day. But then Russia's finance ministry now complains about the damaging effect of Western sanctions. It says, another, and I quote, another aspect of the current crisis is the undermining of confidence in the existing international monetary and financial system. It also added that the safety of the international reserves and the possibility of free trade and financial transactions are no longer guaranteed. Do you also share the same view?
Well, everything that's happening now can only threaten the security of international world finance. What is going on will actually make the world economy teeter on the brink of destruction. Now, if that happens, you have to wonder, are the parties prepared for the consequences that will follow? Because for certain, if the world economy is threatened, people in the West are going to face far more draconian conditions of living and government from their own governments. And surely, for people who claim that democracy is their most important asset, their most important life goal, this would be a totally retrograde step. So as far as I am concerned, these circumstances now are actually tiptoeing quite apart from the possibility of things kind of inadvertently escalating into a really hot war. There are more nuclear weapons around Europe and Russia than anywhere else in the world. Quite apart from that possibility happening, the economic consequences of what's going on leads to Armageddon.
Well, we'll continue to monitor this event as we've started, from day one of the invasion up until now. What we want to see is that the war is brought to an end so that the world will be at peace. Tete Kofi, a broadcast journalist, joining me from UK. Thank you very kindly for your time.
Pleasure.